Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Aparuta de Sangamatassa Tawara Ye Sodavanta Bamunjantu Sada. One of the epithets for the Buddha when we chant is Loka Vidu, knower of the world. And so this, of course, we can see this as a quality of the Buddha, but this also is something much more practical than just chanting the positive qualities of somebody called Buddha. So that's like reflecting on what is the world, the situation that we're experiencing now. And this is to contemplate or reflect on life as experience rather than describing how life should be. Like if we're just rationalists, then we have theories about how things should be. But in reflective awareness, we're noticing how things are. Like breathing is like this. So we become aware of the breath. We're not saying you should breathe a certain way. There's some standard of breathing that is ideal that we must all strive for. Or we contemplate the experience of sensitivity is like this. So we begin to notice the fact that the human body, this body that we're in with its eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body itself this is sensitive. And sensitivity is like this. So then we look inward. What is it? Just being sensitive. Is that we're now looking at, noticing what it is to feel, or to see, or to hear, or smell, taste, touch, to think, to remember. So we can have ideas about being sensitive, sensitivity, or we can try to make ourselves insensitive, because we might see it as a weakness. To be too sensitive to some people is a sign of weakness. But we're not placing any judgment on sensitivity, but it's just noticing it's like this. Then noticing the world that we live in, the environment, the way it is. It's the experience of we find it more towards just noticing the impermanent nature of our conscious experience, how things rise and cease, begin and end. And so it's knowing the world, which is not a judging the world according to some standard, but the world is like this. The world is sensitive. The world is about birth and death, about meeting and parting, coming and going, about good and bad, about right and wrong, beauty and ugliness, and all the various gradations of experience and qualities that we are subject to in this form. So even though this seems an obvious kind of reality when you recognize it, yet how many people really are aware of the world, in terms of experience? We interpret it usually in a personal way. The habit patterns is to interpret it all in terms of personal limitations or personal feelings, personal ideas. So in noticing the way the world is, we're seeing that it's not a personal thing. A person is a kind of creation of the mind that that we're bound to if we don't awaken, if we just operate within the conditioning, emotional conditioning that we have. Then we see it in terms of this is happening to me, or I am good or bad or whatever accordingly. This is very important to recognize and to know the world is the world, because it's a very strong experience. Having a human body is a continuous kind of experience of being irritated. That when you contemplate what consciousness is in such a form as a human body with 4 elements, earth, fire, water, and air, and just from birth to death, from the time you're born, and when you cry, the moment you're out of your mother's womb, you start screaming, and then the sensitivity and impingement and the irritations that come through this sensitive form till it dies. So it is encouraging to encourage you to contemplate what it is, rather than to judge it according to ideals or ideas that you might have. So, and this is then called the awakened state of awakened awareness. So, to wake up means to know the world as it is. It's not judging the world. If we have ideas about how the world should be, then the way it is oftentimes is seen through our critical mind. It shouldn't be. When you see how countries should be, governments should be, or parents, or partners, or whatever, then we're coming from ideals, standards, usually quite high standards of if everything were perfect. But this realm, its perfection doesn't lie in taking conditioned experience to some kind of peak moment, isn't it? Peak moments are just that. They're kind of they're wonderful in their way, but they're not sustainable. That the flow and movement of our life is around the changiness of the conditioned realm that impinges, that we're involved in, that we're immersed in this conscious form. And so just notice how irritating it is to just to be able to see and hear, smell, taste, touch. It's always something, that isn't quite right. And that it's too cold or too hot, or we have a headache or a backache, or with unwanted noises, odors, and things like this impinge or come in contact with this form, and then we experience its beauty, its ugliness, pleasure, and pain. But even pleasure is irritating when you think of it. I mean, we like pleasure, but just having a lot of pleasure is also very exhausting and irritating. So this is not a criticism, is it? It's just noticing that having a human body is like this, breathing is like this, consciousness is like this. How sensitive we are just with words and thoughts, or tone of voice. One can say things and upset everybody just through a certain tone of voice, or using certain words can be very distressing. Or we remember things of the past that are pleasant or unpleasant, and so we can obsess our minds with about things we shouldn't have done in the past. So we have a lot of guilt and remorse, or self-aversion because of mistakes, failures, or unskillful actions in the past that we remember. So we can get really neurotic because in the present moment, we can be totally obsessed with the thing we shouldn't have done 20 years ago. And we could drive ourselves into a real state of depression and despair. And so being born as a human being is a real challenge in terms of how to use this experience of our human birth, human experience, this sensitive state that we're living in. Some people think of committing suicide, just get it over with. It's just too hard to bear, too much to stand in a lifetime of this continuous irritation and guilt and remorse and fear of the unknown and so forth. Can be just so utterly depressing and despairing that we think we better to just kill ourselves, commit suicide. Or, as the Buddha encouraged us, to wake up to it, learn from it, see it as opportunity, as challenge, as something to learn from. So developing wisdom in terms of the conditions and the experiences that we have in this life, which could be, which are not guaranteed to be always the best. And much of us have had to experience all kinds of frustrations, disappointments, disillusionments, failures. And of course, if we take that personally, it is, one wants to just end it all very quickly. But if you put it in the context of knowing the world is the world, then we can take anything. We have incredible abilities to learn from even the most unfair, the most miserable, painful and nasty conditions. So these are not the obstructions to enlightenment. It's whether we awaken or not. Some people think it's good karma to just have an easy ride, to be born with wealthy parents and high status, beautiful parents, intelligence, easy life, just all the benefits, all the blessings, all the good things is great, is a lot of merit. The good baramis and that. But I would tend to think, sometimes I look at my own life and think, incredible challenges have come to me, that have shaken me, have really upset me, disappointed me, to the point where I've even contemplated suicide in the past. I just want to get this over. I don't want to spend more and more years just in this realm. I can't take it. But then awakening to that, I realize that I can. I'm quite willing to take what life presents and learn from it. So that's the challenge. It's seeing that this is an opportunity that we have as human beings, as conscious beings. Now, the teachings of the Lord Buddha are teachings pointing to this. They're not there to awaken you, rather than to condition you. So you're not, it's not they're not to grasp them as kind of doctrinal positions to take, but expedient means to use to develop, to encourage awakened awareness, mindfulness, intuition, to not fear sensitivity, really open to it, be fully sensitive rather than just try to kind of protect yourself endlessly from possible pain or misfortunes. Knowing the world as the world isn't a kind of resignation in a negative way. It's not, you know how the world is, and just as if it were bad or there's something wrong with it. Because that's not knowing the world as the world. It's studying and taking an interest, investigating, examining experience, and willing to really look at and feel the negative side of experience, not just seek pleasurable sensory pleasures or just pleasurable experiences, but seeing even your most disappointing ones, your worst failures as opportunity to learn, as awaken, as a chance to awaken. We can say as devadutas or messengers that tap us on the shoulder and say, "Wake up." So that's why in Buddhism we like getting old, sickness, disabilities, loss are not seen as things to fear or despise, but as devadutas or heavenly messengers. So like this word devaduta is the Pali word, which is like a duta. Duta means like a messenger of some sort, and a deva is like heaven, heavenly, angelic messengers sent to warn us. Somebody asked me one time, a Christian asked me about if we had angels in Buddhism, and and they said we have angels in Christianity. They're all white and beautiful, play harps, and they're very radiant light beings. I said, well, Buddhist angels are not that way. They're old age sickness. And then the fourth Devaduta is the samana, or the human being who's seeking, who's on the spirit, realizing having the spiritual realization. So that always interested me, because I thought that was quite amusing, seeing an old person as a deva, as an angel, or the sick, or the mentally sick, or the corpses, and monks and nuns as Devadutas. We can look at each other as Devadutas rather than as that's Ajahn Rajiro, and that's Sister Ananda Bodhi, and then they become personalities, don't they? We see each other, like I remember with Ajahn Anando, when the word Anando became so identified with Ajahn Anando that Venerable Ananda, when I ordained him, Gary Thompson, it was to challenge that perception, because the word Ananda had become so fixed into a person, a personality. But in say, just looking at like the shaven head and the saffron robes, and this as seeing them in terms of Devadutas rather than as when you put it into terms of monks and nuns and this senior and junior and all this, then it gets into a kind of personality view, Sakkaya Ditthi. Or this is using your mind in a different way, looking at this as Devadutas rather, so when we see each other actually helping each other to awaken. Or when we look at each other, do we see each other as a person? Think of this monk is like this, and that nun, she's like that, and on and on. We can do it, see it in the very worldly way, or just changing the perspective to the Devaduta. Old people we can see as Devadutas. You can see, like me, I'll be 67 in a few days. Not only a Devaduta on the level of a samana, but an old man. And then as I get sick and senile and that, then I'm even more of a three Devadutas in one. And then when I'm dead, four all in one. Or just reflecting in this way to see, how to use life, in how the malleability of our human mind is endless. I mean, we can be so set and conditioned by just dualistic thinking, the kind of thing you get from your cultural background. For example, I was brought up in a very dualistic way of looking at everything from Christian background. Things are absolutely right or wrong, or good or evil. I mean, these were almost, these were very fixed ways of looking at everything. So you had this very limited use of your mind, because it tended to not move very much. It just moved between these two extremes. But notice in just some of the Buddhist meditational exercises, just the ways of visualizing, of using your mind to create visions of things, to contemplate the 32 parts of the body. I remember when I was first faced with this in Thailand. I kept wanting to think of 32 parts of the body as kind of being physiologically accurate according to Western science. And just observing, contemplating my own 32 parts, it was easier for me to go and find a book on anatomy and physiology and look at a chart, and a picture, than to contemplate the reality of those organs and those conditions existing here and now in this form, that I call myself, that I assume it's me. But it is a different use of learning to flex the mind a bit. What happened? It's also malleable loudspeaker system. Look at yourself also in terms of, I was talking with one of the monks last week about how difficult sometimes it is to see yourself in terms of positive qualities, because we're so used to seeing ourselves in terms of negative, what's wrong, what is the faults. I know with many, especially Western people, Europeans and Americans, it's so, we're so aware. We spend so much time criticizing ourselves and dwelling on what we feel is wrong with us, or not good, or weak, and then we think it's even wrong to admit our good qualities. I used to feel like that. It's like I couldn't, I was being honest when I was admitting my weaknesses and faults. But if I admitted my virtues, that would be like bragging. And here in Britain, it's a very bad taste to brag and tell people how wonderful you are, how much money you make, and or how many important degrees or titles you have. In Thailand, for example, some monks have these name cards and they have all their titles on them. You have BA, MA, PhD, and Chao Kun this, and then head of this province, and they have a whole list, and they say vice president of the World Fellowship of Buddhists, and then the World Congress of Buddhists, so trustees of this and that, because it's quite all right to present yourself in terms of your accomplishments. But here, we think that's very bad taste. It's just, it's embarrassing. You never see in an English home people putting their university degrees up, framing them, putting them up on the walls. It'd be too embarrassed, because it's like boasting or bragging. But so there is a sense of modesty here in Britain, that is also quite lovely in many ways. It's a sense of modesty, but then it can be taken to the extreme where it becomes you have no way of acknowledging any goodness in yourself, or to appreciate your own successes, virtues, and good qualities. And is it going to, are we going to become inflated, egotistical monsters if we admit that we love good things? Why did I become a bhikkhu, Buddhist monk? Why would I choose to live a celibate life in this order, this monastic group. And then I could give you reason out of, because I've just got to, get myself together and make myself, shape up and get my act together. I can't do it any other way. I have to do something, in order to make myself do it. I can look at it in terms of weakness and inability, that I need the support from external conditions because I can't do it myself. Or I can also look at it in terms of being attracted to what is good and virtuous and what is, beautiful. So it's, and both can, have their points to make. Even though I can be fascinated by lower things and the darker side of life, it's not that I'm just so good that I just gravitate to everything that's light and beautiful. Because I've certainly had my fascinations for that which isn't. But I would say, summing up as a character tendency, that I move toward the light and the good, the true and the beautiful. This is the movement I'm interested in, moving in this direction. So that's something very good, something to respect. I see that that this is something very good in my character. Now that's just putting it in terms of personal qualities. It's learning to be honest and admit and make it a conscious kind of appreciation of your own humanity and your individuality. Helps to give you a confidence that you don't have. If you're too obsessed, too overly interested, or too committed to being critical and seeing yourself through the negative perception. So this is being able to use our critical mind, our discriminative abilities and our thoughts, not just to analyze and compare one thing with another, but to examine and investigate in terms of experience. So we awaken to the breath is like this. Awaken to the sensitive state we're in is like this. Awaken to the irritations that we experience as conditions and that contact and irritate our senses. Or the way our own obsessions and emotional habits, whatever they might be, to be able to put them in a perspective of, rather than in seeing that as something to get rid of, it's something to awaken to, change from pushing away, resisting and denying towards awakening, accepting and welcoming. Now, in the First Noble Truth, the Buddha proclaimed this, that there is this dukkha, this suffering. So that is put in this context of noble truth rather than a dismal reality. And if we look at in terms of a dismal reality, what happens? Say, life is just suffering. It's all just suffering. You get old, you get sick and die, and you have to lose all your friends, and all that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. Life is just, that's all it's about. It's just dukkha from the beginning to the end. There's nothing noble in that, is there? It's just pessimism and depression and seeing it in terms of, I don't like it, I don't want suffering. What a bad joke, what a lousy joke God played on us, creating this mess. And me being born in this mess to live just to get old. What am I living for? Just to get old, get sick and die. And of course that's very depressing, isn't it? That's not a noble truth, isn't it? You're creating a problem around the way things are. So then, a noble truth, there is suffering. So it's and the advice, the prescription to deal with this suffering is to welcome it, to understand it, to open to it, to admit it, to begin to notice and accept, and that willingness to embrace and learn from that which we don't like, don't want. The pain or the frustration, the irritation, and on, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, whatever. So you can see, like in dukkha, and then suffering and then should be understood, or to understand suffering is like opening to it. We say, we understand suffering because it's, and then we rationalize it, but that's not understanding. It's welcoming, embracing suffering that we're experiencing, our frustration, our despair, our pain, everything that, the irritation, the boredom, fear and desires, and this welcoming, opening, accepting, and then this is a noble truth, isn't it? Because our humanity then is being ennobled. It's an Aryan truth. This word Arya. Aryan means noble. So what is noble? And the English word noble, it has a kind of grand quality, isn't it? It rises up. If you're noble, you rise up to things. You don't just say, oh, life is just misery and I just want to hide away from it because I can't bear it. There's nothing noble in that, is it? Or blaming the suffering. God, why did you create this mess? It's your fault. You're brought up as a Christian sometimes, and you say, I used to feel furious with God. That if I were God, I would have created a lot better situation than this one. I remember as a child thinking, if I were God, I wouldn't have created pain. Because you'd fall down and hurt yourself, and you think, why does God allow this? Why do you create a realm where there's so much pain? If I were God, and I created the world, I wouldn't create pain. And my mother, she never could answer that question very well. Because the pain is, something that shouldn't be. There's something wrong. Or is pain a noble truth? Is old age a noble truth? Is loss, separation, all these experiences that we all have to have in this form, in this human realm, seeing it in terms of complaining and blaming, or in terms of a noble truth. Now this is what I'm pointing to, is this, we can look at things in different ways. We can choose. We're not just stuck with one program. and a victim of the program we did get, which might not be very good. If we already got the program from the culture and from the family we were born into, might not be a very good program actually. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's fairly all right, but still, as just limited to that experience alone, when we have this opportunity to explore, investigate reality, to know in a direct way. The enlightenment is not something remote and impossible, even though you can see it in terms of some very abstract state that you hold up and aim for, but you don't think you'll ever be able to achieve. And that way of thinking is based on what? And you think of yourself as this kind of person. My personality, if I depended on my personality, I couldn't do anything. Ever hope to get enlightened. Because my personality can't possibly conceive myself as a person being enlightened. My personality is conditioned to think of myself in terms of what's wrong with me. Coming from a competitive society, where you're very much aware of who's better or who's worse, who's above and who's below. So I can't trust that. My personal habits are not, they're conditioned things, so they don't have any, they aren't flexible in themselves. If you just attach and interpret experience through those perceptions and never learn to look at things in any other way, then you are stuck with a limited view. That can be just very depressing way of having to live your life. So, like awakening, isn't it? Wake up, and then we begin to see, getting beyond the rigid dualism, the puritanical dualism, or the initial program that you acquire through your family, social background. Trusting in your own intuitive awakened sense. Don't trust in your views and opinions about anything, about yourself or Buddhism or in the world. Those are oftentimes very biased. We get very biased views of each other. We have racial prejudices, class identities, and ethnic biases, and feelings of social superiority or inferiority or whatever. And these are not to be trusted. These are not perceptions that they're conditioned, admittedly, but we can look at things in different ways. We don't have to look at something always from the conditioning that we've acquired. So there's this, when the Buddha talks about the Buddha mind, is a very flexible, malleable. It's universal. We can see things in so many different ways. The mind has this radiant quality to it. Consciousness is a radiance. It's light itself. So as we begin to let go of always limiting ourselves through the distortions of our conditioned mental states, then we begin to understand, see things as they really are. Know the Dhamma, enlightenment, These are not something that are distant, remote, and impossible, unless you want to hold to those views from a kind of personal attitude about it, about you as a person, and holding these perceptions so high that you can way beyond your personal ability to ever achieve them. Then that's because you haven't awakened to what you're doing. You're merely operating from a conditioned view of everything. So one thing I say, like, there is dukkha. Dukkha should be welcomed. This is my new interpretation. Dukkha should be understood, and dukkha should be welcomed. How's that? Try that one. Now you can experiment with these different words. You don't have to say, the Pali scriptures say, understand. They didn't say welcome. But Pali scriptures they don't say understand. They use a Pali word that we translate as understand. And maybe we don't even understand what understand means. Did you ever think of that? Maybe even our own language, we don't understand. We're so limited to a particular narrow view of the word understand. We can't expand it. That's why it's like to see where we can experiment with the words, just observe the effect of it. So I say welcoming now, not because I found the real translation for this, and anyone who's going back to use understand is somehow, it's not right. My view, my particular translation is, then that's getting into, another rigid, arrogant approach. I'm not interested in proving that I'm right, and my translations are the best, but just seeing how they work. What is the effect of it in terms of the here and now? So that I'm sharing this with you, as a way of encouraging you to have to have that right and that freedom to know yourself in a way that you don't have to always try to fit yourself into the views, opinions of even a tradition or orthodox forms or definitions or our particular group way of looking at things or our tradition. So suffering, there is dukkha. Dukkha should be welcomed, and dukkha has been welcomed. What is that like? Try it out. I don't know if it worked for you, but it does for me. Because welcoming is, I tend to be in the habit tendencies to dukkha, to push it away. That's my conditioning, my personality. Suffering, push it away. Don't want it. Somebody else is suffering. I see somebody. I don't want to go near them. I don't want to have to. I want to push away from them. There's a problem. Ajahn Sumedho, I've got I push away. I don't want. I don't want a problem. This is my character tendencies to do that. Resisting, I don't want to know about the suffering. Tell me the good things. Say, how are you today? I'm fine, Ajahn Sumedho. I just love it here at Amaravati, and I love being a monk, and I just adore the Dhamma and the Theravada form and the Vinaya, and I love the whole thing. And, that makes me feel so good. Tell me more. And I go to somebody else, how are you this morning? This life is such a dreary, miserable thing. I'm fed up. I want to disrobe. I don't want to hear that. Don't tell me that. So then you kind of like you're going around trying to, make people kind of make you feel good, Tell me the good things because that makes me feel good. But don't tell me the bad stuff because that makes me feel bad. I don't want to feel bad. I don't want suffering. I don't welcome it. I want to get rid of it. And so therefore I'm going to try to live my life so that I can get as much of the good stuff as I can and push away the bad stuff. But then in this new translation, there's suffering. Suffering should be welcomed, and then it changes, isn't it? It works better. So then you see the suffering, your own, somebody else's problems, difficulties, and so forth, as welcoming rather than as things to run away from or push away. So like this, we were on this retreat for the past week, and that like I really found that I really like the formal practice. I like to sit here and face the shrine, and I like the temple. So it's a very pleasant, very nice place to sit, and then I sit on this. With this nice cushion, and then I have this triangular cushion on the back that just supports the spine so I can sit very comfortably for long periods of time. And I look at the shrine, and everything, the mind goes very still and quiet. And then when I look around, face what happens when my mind isn't when I'm looking at all of you? So that this is just a way of contemplating. Does when I'm looking at the shrine, all the things at the shrine tend to bring peace and calm. So you have candles and incense and Buddha image and very, things that aren't dukkha for me. They bring kind of, if they inspire, they're pleasing. They aren't irritating or causing me any kind of unpleasant feeling. Or if I don't particularly want to look at them, I just close my eyes. Don't look at anything. But then, turning around and you're all here, what happens? So then it brings up, say, sense of there's so many different possibilities, isn't it? All these different people. Some I don't know even. Some I think I know. I've got views about some of you. You're like this and they're like that. And then I've got memories, and each person will bring up certain memories, and some pleasant, some unpleasant memories. Some people have different ways of moving and acting and saying things that bring up different feelings in my mind, in my consciousness. So then if I'm, I can't bear this world that is like that, I have to turn away, because I immediately turn around to look at the shrine again. Or is when I'm looking at the shrine, if I begin to allow, say, the awareness to take me to no longer just non-grasping, to the reality of non-attachment, and really know this, not depend on the lack of stimulation for this, or turning away from the community in order to get it, but really seeing that turning toward the community and realizing this, it's something here, isn't it? It's not dependent on facing this direction. We're beginning to awaken to the reality rather than toward a conditioned experience that we become very dependent upon. So in this sense of Sangha, refuge in Sangha, it's not refuge in, we can define Sangha in terms of the 4 pairs, the 8 kinds of noble beings. How many fit into that description? How many of your egos think of yourself as Sotapanna, Sakata, Sotapanna, Magga, Sotapanna, Pala, Sakata, Kami, Magga, Sakata, Kami, Pala, Anakami, Magga, Anakami, Pala, Arahanta, Magga, Arahanta, Pala? Which one are you? How can I take refuge in a bunch of people that don't, and even 4 pairs, 8 kinds of noble beings? It remains very abstract, doesn't it? Kind of ideal, these kind of stages, ideal kind of being somewhere maybe. Well, are they here? And then we look, there's this monk and that, no. So then, what's the refuge in Sangha then? We want to abstract it, or looking at Sangha like Sangha, rather than as this person, this personality. Whether anybody, is it up to me to decide who's a Sotapanna, Sakata, Kami, and all like that, and to figure out who I can take refuge with? Because then it's a matter of my ego again, isn't it? Here I am, this person trying to decide what somebody else is. So it's like taking these words like Sangha and making them like work for you. The Sangha, it can be, make it practical. Like we have the same refuge. We're the Sangha. Our refuge is in Buddha and Dhamma and Sangha, not in personal attitudes or preferences or habits or views and opinions. So when we see each other in terms of Sangha or as Devadutas, it's a way of looking at each other that is beginning to appreciate and respect and getting beyond just personal preference, personal view, personal reactivity. But we're not trying to annihilate that, because the dukkha that we welcome is all this personal reactivity. Why I feel angry with you, or why I feel jealous, or why I feel rejected, or things like this, is not trying to dismiss this. But as we trust in this awakened state, then we can welcome our own feelings, foolish feelings or whatever, or neurotic habits. We can welcome these things in terms of a noble truth rather than personal faults. So this is the observance night, and everybody's invited to sit till the magic hour of midnight.